Okay, so today I'm going to be presenting about Android automation. Specifically, I'll be covering the ability to track your location via SMS, but in general, just how to automate on an Android device as well. So how can we achieve automation on an Android device? Well, we can use an application called Tasker, which allows you to automate pretty much anything using the device hardware and software. So if you think about what your phone has, you can use GPS, you can use Bluetooth, the kinds of hardware that obviously your device has. In the normal way, you'd have to maybe go out and buy a Raspberry Pi and all these various different components and solder them together, whereas obviously using an Android device, you can just do it out of the box. You don't need to buy anything. So an introduction of what Tasker is. There's four main areas of what the application does, and you've got tasks, which is basically an action which is carried out by the device. You could think of this as a connector where it could be, for example, turning on the torch on your phone. You've also then got profiles, which is a group of tasks which run when a trigger is activated. So it could be that every day you want to turn on the torch at 4 p.m. for 2 seconds, for example. And then they could also be seen as triggers if you're comparing it to Tray, and obviously a fully built workflow. And then you've got scenes, which is essentially kind of like an embedded version of the automation, where you can hook up the tasks and profiles to a GUI. So for example, you could have like a small app icon on your device, and when you click on that, it triggers off a certain piece of automation or a certain task. So that could be compared to embedded on Tray. And then you've also got vars, which is essentially being able to set variables across the application itself, so you can set them and get them from various different tasks and profiles. And obviously that could be compared to the data storage connector. So what can you automate using Tasker? Well, really, if you think about it, you can automate quite a lot because you have the power of using the device hardware. As I mentioned before, you can use Bluetooth, you can use GPS, you can use SMS. Anything that your phone can do from a software or hardware point of view, you can potentially automate it. And as I've mentioned before, you don't actually have to go out and learn how to solder something or buy all these various different components, which can add up and cost a lot of money and take time from a hands-on point of view, because you need to learn how to solder and learn or understand about electronics, maybe to utilize Bluetooth or something like that. So I'll give you an example of what we can automate with Tasker later on, but essentially it's kind of possibilities are endless, but obviously limited to what the device and obviously what the software can do. So this is what the application looks like. And you've got profiles, tasks, scenes, and variables. And the profiles are split into different sections. So you've got application, day, event, location, state, and time. These are essentially categories that you can pick from. So an example of what the application category can do. So you could do it so that, for example, when you open up a certain app, for example, if you opened up the YouTube app, you could do some automation so that you enable the orientation, you set the orientation to landscape, for example. Obviously day and time could be examples of a cron job, or you could do it every day at a certain time, every Monday, every weekday, something like that. And then event, which is essentially a hardware event. So you could do it so that when you get a text message or something like that. Location is pretty obvious. You can set up different, you can set up automation so that if you're in a certain location, or if you are in the bounds of a certain area on a map, then you can trigger something to happen. And then state is similar to event. State could be something like using the gyroscope of your device. So if you turned your phone upside down, it could mute it. I know that this is now pretty much incorporated into quite a lot of Android OSs now, because it's a feature on the device itself. But before, it was a inbuilt task or automation, or however you want to call it. You could use Tasker to do that. Now, obviously, it's not as efficient as if the OS was doing it itself. So those are profiles. So you can set up essentially triggers based on those, and kind of the same with tasks as well. So if I move over to the next, I forgot to mention. So there's also third-party integrations which you can use for Tasker. So there's K9 email received. So it's fairly self-explanatory. If you receive an email, you can trigger some workflow or automation to run. OpenWatch, I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I believe, I might be wrong, it's where you can hook up like wearable devices like Internet of Things. And Reddit Notify, fairly simple. It integrates with Reddit. There are more third-party things you can integrate with, but those are just a few. So then we move on to the tasks. So as you can see, there's a long list of categories that you can pick from, and this is a scrollable list, so there are more options. But if I just go over a few, just so you can get an idea of what you can actually do with Tasker. So as I mentioned before, apps. So if you opened up a certain app, or you could do it so that if you open up a certain app, another app opens in the background. Audio could be turning up the device or muting it. If you could set it up so that if it's a certain time of day, you can mute your device so that you don't receive text messages or something like that. Code, I've not actually looked at myself, but as far as I'm aware, you can run code that runs on a lower level than the actual app itself. So you could, this is where it gets a bit more complicated, and you can automate pretty much anything. And then the other ones, such as like phone, for example, where you could, on receipt of a text message, or on receipt of an incoming call, and then settings could be if you enabled Bluetooth or something like that. They're all fairly self-explanatory categories, but those are just a few examples of what you can expect to achieve if you were to build some automation with this. And then, not forgetting, if you really wanted to, you could, if you have your phone Android device rooted, you can unlock even more task and functionality, because you can do what's considered a privileged task, such as running a low-level script on the device itself, or even what's considered a privilege task would be toggling data roaming, or even enabling and disabling certain chips on board the device. But obviously you'd have to root your device to be able to do that. So I had the idea of being able to track your device. So essentially, my idea was, let's assume I left my phone on the train and I didn't have anything installed, or I don't have, because obviously iPhones include track my phone, find my iPhone. Android devices, not all of them have such a thing. So, and obviously as well, it's usually a third-party application, so you're potentially being tracked by someone. Whereas if you use this, obviously we can build it ourselves. We know exactly what it's doing, exactly where the data is going, etc. So essentially, I had the idea so that if I send, or if my phone receives a certain string for a text message, then it will automatically reply with the location of the device. Or, I mean, there's other ways you can, there's other things you could do with this as well. So just specifically on the location, you could do it so that many people have home automation where you can turn your heating on if you're within a 500-yard radius of your home, or a mile radius of your home. You could potentially set it up so that if you're within a certain radius of a map location, you could trigger something to happen. Essentially, like, you can do a lot with it. Moving on to the next slide. So in order to automate the I've lost my phone text message automation, we would need to set up a profile which is upon receipt of a text message with a certain word. Obviously, so that would be the trigger, and then the tasks would be to get the current location, and then we'd have to add another task which would send the text message back to the device, to the phone number that it received. So with the location of the device as a Google Maps link. So essentially, that if you were to read that as Cucumber, it would be, given I receive a text message with string #trigger, get my current location, and then reply to the number receive of the text message with the location of the Google Maps of the device. So I've actually built this, and I use it. I don't have it turned on all the time, but most of the time I have it turned on if I'm out and about. And I've written a blog post on it, exactly how you can achieve this with step-by-step guide of screenshots and that, which I'll share at the end of this. But as you can see here, so if you look at the video, so I'm sending myself a text message, receiving the same text message back because I'm texting myself. And then in a second, there we go. So my device has automatically sent back the location of where my device is at that moment in time with a Google Maps link. So it's fairly self-explanatory. My trigger for this automation is the text message. And why would you want to build it? Well, essentially, automation is fun, as we all know, and you can achieve a lot with it. Specifically for this automated task, why would you want to build it? Well, no third parties are tracking you, because you know exactly what is happening and where your data is going. It's not going to some server somewhere and being stored in some remote location for potentially to be hacked. And then again, there's also the ability that there's no coding required. Essentially, you just click a category, click an option, and as long as you've got some logical understanding of how automation works, you can build anything. And then obviously you can do whatever you want with that. So obviously that's the example of what I've built with it. And so what have other people automated with Tasker? So there's a Reddit page which people have posted what they've done with Tasker. I don't know how active it is because I only look at it every now and then, but an easy example would be an audio alert when the battery is low or fully charged. I actually used to have this running on my device at my old company, but it would get really annoying, and every time my phone was fully charged, my phone would speak in a robotic voice saying, your phone has fully charged, please unplug it. Or if my battery was low, it would say, Thomas, your battery is low, please plug me in. And then it would actually send a text message to a list of people saying, if you're trying to get hold of me, my battery's low, I might not be available. But then, so that's an easy example of what you can do with this. And then a more intermediate example of what you can do with it. I don't know how difficult it is to do because I've not done it myself, but it would be possible to take a selfie on the device when an incorrect PIN is entered. So say someone's stolen your phone and they type the password in a few times wrong, you could actually find out who they are, take a picture of who they are and maybe send it to yourself in an email. So obviously that's what you can automate with it. But something that I found which was quite advanced, which was someone's actually built the ability to mute Spotify adverts. I don't exactly know how they're achieving this, but there is a Reddit link which I can post later on to share how this is achieved. But I think it's something to do with timing or actually listening to the output of the device and working out when it's an advert or not, and then just muting the volume. So like I say, there's really a lot you can build with this, and it can be as easy as turning on your torch when you receive a text message, for example, or something advanced as muting Spotify adverts. So thank you for listening, and obviously now you know how to automate using an Android device. And like I say, I've written a blog post on how you can automate this specific task. And obviously, if anyone else wants me to write up a guide on how to automate other things, then let me know, and I'd be happy to do so.